Yo, howdy. So, Act 4, nod-krai. We were close to greatness. We were very, very close to greatness. But then, in typical Hoyo fashion, they had to succumb to the gotcha way of storytelling, and also not knowing how to end the story when you can end the story. So, but overall, pretty good. Of course, my favorite part of the quest was the Khaenri'ah flashback. My least favorite part of the quest was what came after the Khaenri'ah flashback. So, yeah, it was like kind of a whiplash because it was really, really, really good. And then we were like, oh, wait, we need to sell Nefer because she's the current banner character and this is a gotcha game. Oh well, but let's talk about this act. So yeah, overall really good lore, good setup, good dialogue for the most part, mainly in the Khaenri'ah stuff. We get introduced to a few more characters. We get Albedo, we get Durin, who's becoming more aligned and in tune with human society, and then we get Dainsleif. We're starting to involve more and more people from Khaenri'ah, the disaster that happened 500 years ago that sort of set the motion for the story. Even though it's nice to see Albedo, it's cool to see Durin being introduced, it's cool to see Dainsleif in the main story quest. I would like to see more antagonists. I keep echoing this, but I would just like to see more antagonists. Maybe there will be more sinners involved in the next Archon quests. Maybe Tholindis will have a bigger role to play. So anyways, yeah, the main point is that, yeah, I just want more antagonists. That's it. Yeah, so essentially Dane is here because the Wild Hunt is his enemy. The enemy of my enemy is my friend, so, he joins the entirety of nod-krai, even though he's, related to Rerir in some way. Essentially, Dane also helps reveal to us some more explanations as to why the sinners became the sinners, because he personally knew all of them, and, this also serves as a way for him to confront his past, right? To meaningfully confront the sinners of what happened 500 years ago, because this is the first time that he's seeing one of the sinners. What I take away from this Act 4 is that this really highlights the fall of Khaenri'ah. Khaenri'ah was always destined or fated to crumble and such, but this night, the night that Dainsleif recalls, is like the night that really accelerated that decline, right? The Venster King one day called Dainsleif's brother, Vedrfolnir, over to the courtroom and then just gouged out Vedrfolnir's eyes and imprisoned him, which prompted Dainsleif to finally say, hey, this is enough. The king has gone way, way, way too much into madness, so they're basically going to revolt against the king. You have big figures like Sociologi and Reunite that come to the aid of Dainsleif, but then something happens in the courtroom where the abyssal power gets to everyone, and they accept the power of the abyss. This is how Khaenri'ah fell, essentially, which is like, dang, I want to know more. There's more to it than that, but it's like, wow. It's because of Dainsleif probably feels some kind of really personal reason as to why it happened, because he was the one who initiated this whole rebellion. So yeah, it's very personal to Dainsleif, and that's why he wants to be involved in taking down Rerir as well, because Rerir was his former friend. Anyways, we come up with more plans to try to defeat Rerir. So Albedo and Durin, they're going to help do some experimentation on the Wild Hunt to maybe try to find some kind of weakness that they could use against Rerir. Nefer, Lalma, Jehoda, and the Traveler and Paimon, they go further into Rerir's past. It's nice to see how much complexity that they're giving to Rerir's character, because, without a shadow of a doubt, Rerir did really, really bad things. And while he did feel guilty about a lot of them, at the end of the day, he was conscious about the decisions that he made, the decisions to kill and exterminate the people of the Crimson Moon, and even though he did help let some people get away, at the end of the day, he accepts his actions, even though he knows that they're wrong. There's an aspect to that of how it conflicts with Tholindis, because as he finds out, Tholindis is also a descendant of the Crimson Moon, so that comes into play. But then, now both Tholindis and Rerir know about each other's secrets, but yet they don't really tell or talk to each other about it at all, which creates another dynamic between their relationship. Despite all of the secrets that they have, the main thing that needs to be settled between them, the main thing that needs to have closure between them, is the marriage. Right? At the end of the day, it's like he is waiting for her answer, and for some reason she's not giving him one. And that was long before she even knew about what he was doing on the side. About coming to terms with how they feel about each other, despite all of the wrongdoings or the sins that they see in each other, but don't tell each other about. At the end of the day, the story between Rerir and Tholindis is one about love, their proposal, their answers for each other. And I am curious to see how they wrap it up, because in order for them to have a, I think, satisfying conclusion, it should be that whole proposal and marriage that comes into play. That, like, if you resolve that, then it'd be fine to let these characters go to rest, right? To say that they've played their part in the story. There are a lot of like twists and turns in this Khaenri'ah flashback with Rerir and Tholindis that I liked a lot. You know, the conflict between the inner conflict in both of them of whether or not to tell each other or even to report things. The roles that Orlog and Frithur play into the relationship between Tholindis and Rerir, because those two kids, they talk to both of them and they try to steer them towards a single direction, but then Rerir and Tholindis, they also like try to steer back and fight back. It's definitely not a black or white story. They're like mainly to focus on Rerir, even though he's been killing the descendants of the Crimson Moon. Here he is letting some of them go, because at some point, the more and more kids that he saw being killed, he had to draw a line and say that no, the Vinster King's orders to kill these people, it's bad. I've had enough of this. And it's very selfish, as he admits, right? This is a story not for him to be a hero of Khaenri'ah or to try to save the Crimson Moon people. He just himself, personally, wants to be absolved of all of the guilt that he feels. That's the driving force between his motives and also to his love for Tholindis. And that's why towards the end of the flashback, he does succumb to the calling of the Abyss, to the temptations of the Abyss. Because he's desperate, he's under way too much pressure, and he's so desperate to find Tholindis. The fact that Tholindis falls through a moon gate all of a sudden, even though he's right in front of her, like, he can't handle that. Like, it's not about Khaenri'ah, it's not about the nation, it's not about the Crimson Moon people, it's about him and his feelings for Tholindis. I think the other twists that were well done was the fact that at first the voice inside Rerir that was tempting him, I thought, and probably most of the audience doing this, thought that it was the voice of the Abyss calling to him. But then later on, he decides himself that it's likely Vedrfolnir that's doing this because of the whole future thing. This voice is telling him about the future, so Rerir thinks that it's Vedrfolnir that's doing this. But then when he goes to help Vedrfolnir unlock the prison that Vedrfolnir is in, then Vedrfolnir goes, oh wait, I don't know what you're talking about, but wait, do you also have the voice inside your head? So it's like, they can connect on this aspect, even though Rerir wants to have no part to do with this. It's just a nice touch of, we're both in the same boat here. Something else I was wondering that maybe the story should expand on more is that it's unclear to me why both Rerir and Tholindis seem to love each other. They don't really explain exactly why it is that they have feelings and they love each other. They just sort of say, oh, they're my girlfriend, they're my boyfriend, I proposed to her. That's sort of it, but it's hard for me to understand why it is that they love each other. And I feel like that might help me in seeing more of their actions and the reasoning behind their actions. For Tholindis, for example, since she knows that Rerir has been killing people of her kind, right, the Crimson Moon descendants, then what is keeping her attached to him? Why doesn't she just say, no, I don't want to be with him anymore? What is that? What are the relationships and the feelings that's keeping them together? I'd like that to be expanded on more. I do genuinely find that Dainsleif and Rerir are friends, just based on the interactions that they've had in the previous flashbacks, and then the fact that even though Rerir is the only nobody out of them, Dain still trusted him enough to bring him over to try to free Vedrfolnir and revolt against the king. Yeah, this was the day that Khaenri'ah fell. And also the fact that we know that Tholindis is at the destination of the moon gate, that also likely relates to Columbina, because Columbina was born as a moon goddess, so likely there's going to be some kind of connection and interaction there. And as Nefer sums it up, the fall of Khaenri'ah was basically the buildup of a bunch of white lies that just eventually built up so much and just exploded. Just maybe as the Vincer King wanted. Essentially, to me, this is the last part of the act, and then, there's the whole fight against Rerir where they seal him. But yeah, I find it strange that they put Nefer's backstory into here, where clearly it broke the pace of the storytelling because as they figure out the reasons behind, the fall of Khaenri'ah and Rerir's motives, there's the whole gotcha system saying, oh wait, we have to sell this current character that's on the banner, so could you please tell us something about Nefer? And try your best to insert it into the main story and connect it, which, it is kind of connected at the end because Rerir does appear in Nefer's memories, but if you remove the whole backstory about Nefer, you could still have the same product, but better. Because it does make sense that if Nefer's able to infiltrate into Rerir, then it makes sense to me that Rerir would know some kind of mechanism to fight back and to combat that, to use that against Nefer. So if we had exited the Khaenri'ah flashback and transitioned immediately into Rerir, corrupting the chessboard of Nefer's, that would have been fine. That would have been good. It is what it is. But essentially, yeah, the next 2 days of the quest, we've trapped Rerir with the help of Dainsleif and Columbina into the chessboard, and he's gonna break out in 2 days, so we do some preparations. Eventually, the battle that we do against him is won because thanks to Dainsleif, Columbina, Albedo, Durin, we're able to channel some of the powers that Rerir uses and use that against him, and that's how we're able to create a seal and send them into the dimension where we'll likely confront him finally, or probably permanently, in the next few Archon quests. I think the main other points that I want to bring up is some more interactions between different characters, namely Dainsleif and Columbina. I like their interactions a lot, just the two of them reflecting on the past, how they change their opinions with new information, because, it's normal to do that. When you get new information, it's normal to change your opinions. So Dain sort of sees the whole disaster 500 years ago in a kind of new light, based on the information he learned about Rerir, his former friend, or maybe he still sees him as a friend. Columbina, she has a new perspective on trying to find a name, feeling more attached to nod-krai as a whole. Like both Dainsleif and Columbina, they have guilt over the past, and then it shows that talking about it helps. You know who never talked about their guilt with anyone else? Rerir and Tholindis. I'd probably be interested in making some more specific video analysis essays about them in the future. So I guess, yeah, hopefully I get around to doing that. Yeah, anyways, there's a victory celebration after the fight with Rerir, and that was the end of the Archon quest. Until we got 3 more scenes out of nowhere, even though the ending credits happened. And, I appreciate the scenes with Arlecchino, Sandrone, talking to each other, as well as Columbina talking with Sandrone. But I have to say, I think it was very odd to also have Sandrone talk to us for like 10, 15 extra minutes about Fontaine's past and Alain and such. Cool, I guess, but again, it's just the whole storytelling aspect. It's the whole pacing that's, that was like weak. That was like definitely a weaker part of the quest. Yeah, overall, I had a pretty good time with the quest. And yeah, looking forward to more, so thank you for watching this video. I guess we'll see some more Durin focus in the next update, and then probably wrap up the story in Columbina's update 6.3 or something. So yeah, let's see what happens there. Cool. Catch you in the next one.